absinthe, but then Nisha went down the hall and came back with another bottle of some kind of liquor or other. It had a pirate on the bottle. John was getting talkative and was suddenly in action hero mode. "We need weapons. That's the first step," he said. "We may have to improvise something. All those assholes gotta pay." Pay for what? He was getting loud, and that made Amy nervous because, apocalypse or not, it was against building policy to have overnight visitors from off campus, and if the RA caught John in the room, she'd make him leave. And then what would he do? Sleep in the truck? But now, he and Amy's roommate were getting drunk and downing pizza and making a party out of it. Everybody deals with crisis differently, I guess. They asked Amy if they could use her laptop, and they both huddled over it, refreshing news websites and all of the social networking hubs over and over and over again, even though nothing new was coming out of undisclosed, and Amy was pretty sure nothing new would come out until daytime. If nobody had reporters on the inside, and the phone lines were down, then all that was coming out were the stupid rumors. Sitting there and sucking up the rumors wasn't doing anyone any good. It was just following the crisis as a form of entertainment. The crisis that David was stuck right in the middle of. Amy didn't think either of them even noticed when she got up, put on her jacket, and walked out. There were still a lot of people in the common room. The channel got switched to Fox News, and a panel of experts was desperately trying to fill airtime by finding ways to rephrase the nothing that they knew over and over again. She thought it was fascinating how the coverage on the internet and the coverage on TV were from alternate universes. TV was all terror, terrorist, Al-Qaeda, and the internet was zombies, zombies, zombies. Amy just kept walking toward the elevator and headed down, out of the building. She needed air. The campus was buzzing. The hot dog truck was pulled up in front of the building, and there was a line 3 wide and 10 deep in front of it. Amy walked past because she wanted to wish Spiro, the hot dog guy, a happy birthday. His was one of the over 200 birthdays programmed into the calendar app on her phone. He smiled and told her the hot dogs were free tonight, 1 per customer, not because of his birthday, but because of the other thing. She passed a flyer posted to a utility pole with a huge letter Z on it, which she ignored, but then she passed another one, and another. Then she arrived at the visitors' parking lot and found one under the windshield of David's truck, and all of the other cars, and read it. Meeting, Z, Powder Keg, 2nd Street, every day at noon. Survival, basic weapons training, general preparedness. It's here. Be ready. Zombie nerds. They probably had the flyers already made up for this. There was nobody creepier than the zombie nerds. College guys who not only watched zombie movies and read zombie novels and played zombie video games, but actually formed clubs and collected zombie-killing weapons. Gun shops around there actually stocked zombie targets and special zombie bullets with glow-in-the-dark tips. Not toy bullets, mind you. These guys would go out in the woods and train and shoot and defend to the death their right to stay in childhood until age 35. She climbed inside the truck. She wasn't going anywhere. She had never learned to drive. Her car accident happened not long before she would have been due to take her driver's ed courses in high school. She never got back around to it after she went back to school, and now the thought of it terrified her. She didn't know how anybody did it, hurtling down the highway at 65 miles an hour, while a barrage of other cars come flying toward you like huge cannon shells, whipping past in the next lane, just 5 feet from your own squishy body. If at that moment one of you nudges your steering wheel at the wrong time, 2 seconds later, your body is a bunch of spaghetti wrapped around bundles of twisted steel. She'd yell at David for eating while he drove, a Coke between his legs and a hamburger in one hand, steering with 2 fingers at night. It's like nobody in the world gets how fragile life is, how fragile our bodies are. Amy got the crying to stop about 10 minutes later. Her tear ducts were getting sore. She turned the flyer over and found a pen in her purse. She held the flyer to her thigh with the stump of her left wrist and began writing with her right. She was making a list. 1. Call the Centers for Disease Control. John said that's who was on the scene of the house fire, which made sense because this was sort of a disease. If so, at some point they had to establish a hotline for people to get in contact with their loved ones inside quarantine. There'd be riots otherwise. They were still Americans. There was still such a thing as the Constitution. All she needed them to do was confirm that David was okay, even if she wasn't allowed to see him or talk to him. 2. Exhaust all means of contacting David. One way or the other, it didn't seem plausible that the government could really shut down all forms of communication, not in the 21st century. She could have John post a message to him on his blog. She would post on Facebook. She would email him. She would try the cell again. Write a paper letter addressed to the undisclosed quarantine operation sent, "Attention, David Wong." It was driving her crazy not knowing. Where was he right now, at this moment? Wandering free around town? In a temporary CDC plague tent or something? Crashing at John's old place? She thought for a moment, then jotted down, 3. If David is in CDC custody, get him a care package. His house had burned down. That meant he needed everything. Clothes, heartburn pills, replacement contact lenses in case he lost one, dandruff shampoo, some Oreos, a book. One more idea occurred to her. It should have come to her sooner. She wrote, 4. Contact Marconi? Marconi, if you haven't heard of him, was Dr. Albert Marconi. He wrote books and hosted a show on the History Channel about monsters and ghosts and stuff. David and John knew him because their paths had crossed a few times. If anybody knew what to do, he would. Heck, he was probably on his way here. Probably started calling his producer and packing his bags the moment that zombie video hit the news. Then, with resolve, Amy filled in the last item. 5. If none of the above can be done, get into the quarantine. Getting out of a quarantine was hard, but getting in would be the easiest thing in the world, right? All you had to do was show up and say you were infected. She wouldn't even need to lie. She had spent 12 straight hours with somebody who was at outbreak ground zero. Just tell them that. Instant ticket in. The problem would be figuring out how to find David once she was in there. If the government had him somewhere, they may not allow them to stay together since they're not married. If they didn't have him, finding where he was in town could be a chore. Still, just being inside the city would put her 90% closer. She folded up the paper and put it in her purse. There. Now she had a plan. She felt better. She would get some sleep and get a fresh start with John tomorrow. 7 days, 13 hours until the massacre at Firth Asylum. Amy started trying to wake up John at 9 in the morning. He didn't get up until 2 in the afternoon. He was cranky and despondent. When she suggested calling Dr. Marconi and asked him if he had a phone number for him, John mumbled that he would take care of it. After she reminded him 6 more times over the next 2 hours, finally, he got on her laptop and started doing something or other, which she took as progress, until she leaned over him and realized he was on the freaking website for Marconi's TV show, trying to find a phone number. She could have done that 8 hours ago. John wound up calling a number that she was pretty sure was for ordering DVD box sets of Marconi's show, and leaving a rambling voicemail that no sane human being would respond to. Then, the rest of that evening was spent trying to find John a place to stay. But all of the hotels in town were booked with people unable to get back home to undisclosed, and all the news media converging on the area. They wound up having to put him up in a motel an hour away, so now John would have to make a 2-hour round trip every time they needed to do anything. So here are all the other people running around in a panic trying to stock up to survive the end of the world, and Amy and John were farting trying to find a hotel, and Ah! She wasn't going to cry. Oh, and Amy paid. For everything. John said he was expecting a paycheck from the temp job he had working for a DJ doing parties and weddings and stuff, but of course, said DJ lived in undisclosed, so who knows if he got out, or if he was dead, or if he was a monster. So anyway, that was Sunday gone. 6 days, 18 hours until the massacre at Firth Asylum. Amy had taken to avoiding the common room because there was almost a party atmosphere there. Sure, people would talk about it like it was this big national tragedy, but you could tell they were into it, like it was something they could seize on to break up the routine. Just one more bit of drama that played out on the big common room TV. The big news Monday morning was that the government had scheduled a press conference, the first one since all of this happened. It was also streamed on the internet, so Amy could follow it from her phone in her dorm room, away from the spectators. The stream on her phone was delayed by 7 or 8 seconds for whatever technical internet reason, so it created a weird effect where she could faintly hear the guy leading the news conference say a line down the hall before he'd say it again on her phone a few seconds later. She was alone. John was at the hotel, and her roommate was down the hall with the crowd. First, the guy, a middle-aged guy with a young George Clooney haircut, announced a phone hotline they had set up, but said to please not call with inquiries about loved ones. The number was purely to report that you or someone you knew were showing symptoms of infection, so they needed to keep those lines free since containing infection had to be first priority. He read off the number and Amy hurriedly dug the zombie flyer out of her purse and jotted it down. The guy also said that they had set up a patient treatment facility at the undisclosed hospital, and that all infected and suspected infected were being transported there and given the best care possible. In the meantime, they were imposing a strict sundown curfew in the city, and they would be going house to house to check for infected individuals. The guy was good at his job. Amy found herself actually feeling better. As horrible as John had described the situation and what they had seen, this guy here seemed on top of it. Then, something weird happened. The guy was winding down the press conference with some generic lines about how they were busily researching the outbreak and urged people to neither believe nor spread irresponsible internet rumors. Then, CNN abruptly cut back to the anchor and everyone in the common room screamed their heads off. This completely baffled Amy as the anchor was just a lady in a pantsuit, but then she remembered the delay. She had 5 solid seconds to tense up her whole body while she waited to see what they had seen. The anchor quickly said that they had exclusive new video that had just leaked from Outbreak Ground Zero, and in the middle of her sentence, they cut to a grainy video shot from inside a car at night. The chaos had already started before they got the camera up. There were screams and confused shouts from within the car, inhuman growls from outside. Glass shattered. A fist punched through, a grotesque face biting at the cameraman. A flash of light and a pop filled the interior of the car. A gunshot. The monster recoiled from the window. There were plenty more behind it. 4 or 5 hands now pushing in through the glass. More gunshots. A female voice in the car screamed, "Drive! Drive!" Squealing tires. Another relieved voice rasped, "Oh, my God! Oh, my God! That was so close!" The view swung across the street. Amy thought she saw a reddish dog trot past. She thought, Molly? The woman holding the camera phone had rested her arm so that the camera was now pointing at her lap, but continued recording. That's why the viewers knew she was doomed before she did. While the woman held a nervous conversation with the driver, a crimson stain started forming across her abdomen. Then, a puckered hole formed in her belly, like she was being shot from behind by the world's slowest bullet. Guts spilled out onto her lap, a tangle of wet sausages. The woman screamed. The clip cut to black. Amy shut off her phone. She breathed. She called John and got his voicemail. She paced around her dorm room for a few minutes, trying to think of what to do next. Then she went into the bathroom and threw up. 6 days, 6 hours until the massacre at Firth Asylum. John saw Amy's messages piling up on his phone, and by Monday night, he wanted to throw the thing through a fucking window. He knew how serious the fucking situation was. He could turn on a TV or look out his window. His motel was down the block from a Pentecostal church, and he could see people piling through the door. On a Monday. And oh, by the way, he wanted to say he had been friends with David for 10 years before Amy even knew his fucking name. John felt the loss in a way she couldn't even conceive. He didn't need her calling him every 5 seconds to tell him to do what exactly? John had promised himself he wouldn't drink today. He had overdone it Saturday night. But by Monday evening, he started to have that swimmy flu feeling in his head and gut, and realized it was stupid to try to put himself through rehab on a week when he needed to be 110%. He'd stick to beer, though. That much he decided. He got a 12-pack and settled in for the night in the motel room, watching the news carefully for updates. He'd call Amy tomorrow. From the Journal of Amy Sullivan. Tuesday, 11/8. Lines everywhere. Lines at the stores, lines at the gas station. Everyone is freaking out. People are leaving town and heading north. New people are showing up from the south like refugees. The National Guard has extended the quarantine zone out 5 more miles from around undisclosed. Class canceled. I haven't slept. No answer from John all day. Tried to call Dr. Marconi myself. Left a message. Wednesday, 11/9. Left John 9 messages. Campus and the rest of town is now under a curfew. I think they're going to come looking for us. We should not still be here. Decided I'm not going back to the dorms. Staying with some guys who live off campus. Didn't tell anyone in the dorm where I was going. Rumors from inside quarantine are crazy. News has a rumor that the CDC had to pull all of their staff out of the hospital treatment facility. Government denies it. Hopefully David isn't there either way. Thursday, 11/10. Finally talked to John in the PM. Suddenly he's all bluster, says if we don't hear anything by Saturday night, 1 week after all this started, then he and I will go down to undisclosed ourselves and break David out on Sunday. Told him I didn't need to break him out. I just needed to know that he was okay. Meanwhile, getting calls on my cell from unlisted numbers. I don't answer them. Friday, 11/11. Got a call from Nisha. Said somebody from the government showed up at the dorm looking for me. I called John. Voicemail. All day, voicemail. I cried again. Broke my streak. Saturday, 11/12. Absolute information blackout from undisclosed. No more video clips. No new information. I'm going crazy. I can't keep food down. A week. Where has David been sleeping that whole time? Is he in pain? Is he hungry? The government finally put up their website for families and friends of outbreak victims to search for names. 3 categories: quarantined, status unknown, and deceased. The quarantined list was huge, hundreds of names. David wasn't on it. It was in alphabetical order, but I read the list 4 times to make sure they didn't just put his name in the wrong spot. Then I moved on to status unknown, and he wasn't on there either. And then I decided it was a stupid list because whose status do we actually know at any given time? They could have the whole world on there. I just closed the browser. No return call from Marconi. When I tried to call John, got voicemail only. Again. Left a message reminding him that tomorrow was the day. I gave him a location and told him to pick me up there at 11 a.m. No reason he can't be up and around at that hour. Scared. Excited. Going to see David tomorrow one way or the other. 18 hours until the massacre at Firth Asylum. Amy wasn't sure if she had been more freaked out about the crazy bustle of the campus earlier in the week or the ghost town that it was now. Campus had emptied. Everybody had left to go back home to Mom and Dad, scared the university would get swallowed up in the expanding quarantine zone. Well, those who had parents anyway. That morning, Amy wound up spending a solid hour just trying to get dressed, standing in the guest room at the house where she was now holed up, a huge old house occupied by 3 gay guys she had met in a pottery class. The guest room was just a converted attic covered in Bollywood movie posters and full of discarded exercise machines that had each once starred in their own infomercial. The hour was spent almost entirely standing over her suitcase in her underpants, trying to figure out what would be practical to wear in this situation. After imagining 100 different scenarios for what they'd see once they got down there, she finally realized that the quarantine staff would probably seize everybody's clothes and give them hospital pajamas or something. So the best bet was to wear something she didn't care about losing to an incinerator. So then she was running late, and still had to go to the drugstore. She'd been avoiding it all week because she'd thought it'd be a madhouse like everything else. But it, like everything else, was eerily empty now. Also empty? The shelves. There were handmade signs everywhere about per-customer limits. She wanted to get both of her prescriptions filled, but they were out of Oxy and could only do a partial refill of the muscle relaxer. She tried not to let the guy at the counter see how much this freaked her out, doing the math in her head to see how long the painkillers would last her until she was basically flat on her back and unable to stand up. Answer: 9 days. Then again, the quarantine would be full of doctors, so they probably had all kinds of stuff there. She bought nasal strips. Couldn't sleep without them. She wanted some over-the-counter allergy pills. All gone. She looked for antacid tablets for David. All those were gone, but they had some tropical-flavored Tums that even in an emergency nobody would buy. Tampon aisle was bare. She also noticed the condom case was empty, though she figured that was a little too, optimistic anyway. She did successfully get some sensitive teeth toothpaste and the one brand of deodorant that didn't give her a rash. Finally, the candy aisle. Twizzlers were gone, but she did get some Red Vines, which were basically like stale Twizzlers. She could have kept going around and around the store for the rest of the day, thinking up things she and David might need, but she was already running late, and if John arrived at the meeting site to find she wasn't there, he might freak out. In her message, Amy had told John to pick her up at a bus stop in front of a huge Mexican restaurant that was impossible to miss. She took only one change of clothes, her bag full of pharmacy stuff, and her pillow. With her back the way it was, the pillow was a necessity. She could not sleep on any other pillow. They could have everything else. They could send her into quarantine wearing a potato sack, but they weren't getting the pillow away from her. She got to the bus stop at 3 minutes until 11 and saw the white Bronco round the corner right at 11 on the dot. She took a deep breath and said a prayer. 14 hours until the massacre at Firth Asylum. 2 hours later, Amy was still sitting at the bus stop. It hadn't been John coming around the corner, and it hadn't been a Bronco. It was a different make. Some hillbilly behind the wheel. She called John for the 5th time. Voicemail. As she hung up, 2 guys walked past her on the sidewalk, carrying shotguns, right there in broad daylight. She was freezing, her butt numb on the bus stop bench, sitting there with her pillow on her lap. She called the front desk of John's motel to ask if they could check on him. They wouldn't. She called Nisha to see if she'd heard from him. She hadn't. No crying. She imposed a no-crying rule until further notice. She had eaten half a dozen of the Red Vines. An SUV pulled over about a block down. 4 guys got out of it, all of them carrying hard plastic cases that were shaped like they held rifles. Some had little briefcase-shaped ones that she guessed held pistols or some other kind of littler gun. They all headed off in the same direction. She stared at her phone, willing it to ring. At around 1:30, she finally got John to answer his phone. Hello? John! Oh my God, where are you? At the motel. What's happened? What do you mean, what's happened? I'm here at the bus stop. Okay, are you taking the bus here, or... What? John, it's Sunday. Pause. The buses don't run on Sunday? John! Yeah? What's wrong? Are you crying? She took a moment to compose herself. Failed. Hello? Amy? John, we were supposed to go down to the city today. To see David. Oh. Yeah, okay. I didn't hear your voicemail until just now. My phone has been messing up. I think the network is dropping a lot of calls because... Are you coming? Oh, I don't think so. Today isn't good. I'm really sick. Think it's food poisoning. Probably something going around the motel. Everybody has it, but it's probably for the best anyway. I think we should hold off. But I've been doing a ton of research. It turns out the government has put up a list of names on their website. I haven't been there yet, but let me give you the address. Amy hung up on him and turned off her phone. It was, she would have to say, the angriest she had ever been in her entire life. She took a dozen deep breaths, trying to remember the techniques from the meditation class she had taken. Somebody claimed it could do as much to control pain as any prescription painkiller. Ha ha. She only had one other option. She dug the zombie flyer from her purse, unfolded it, and dialed the hotline number the guy had given out during the press conference. She punched her way through a series of voice options. Then, when she reached an operator, said, hi, my name is Amy Sullivan. My boyfriend's name is David Wong. His house is where the infection started. Both of us were there. I'm showing symptoms. I think I should be quarantined, but I'm 2 hours away and I don't have transportation. Long pause on the other end. Please hold. After a minute, a friendly-sounding male voice came on the line and said, Miss Sullivan? Yes, sir. We'll come get you. Stay exactly where you are. Don't panic. Okay, do you know where the bus stop is in front of... We know where you are. We'll be there within 30 minutes. Please stay where you are. If someone else approaches you, ask them to stay at least 50 feet away. Remain calm. 30 minutes? So they did have people in town. She hung up and bit into a red vine. She felt stupid. This is what she should have done all along. She'd be in undisclosed before dark. 13 hours, 30 minutes until the massacre at Firth Asylum. Dark. Thirsty. I had been hospitalized only once before for a concussion and some cuts and a fractured eye socket I suffered in a car accident, and for a minor gunshot wound unrelated to the accident. I don't remember any of it clearly. It happened during a period of my life that is mostly lost to my memory. But one thing I do remember is the long, slow, touch-and-go bob to consciousness that came with the artificially induced coma of anesthesia. Sights and smells drifting in under the haze of nonsense dream logic, and a sense that the world has skipped ahead in time without me. And under it all, the thirst. This was like that. My last solid memory was stepping through the porta-potty, stepping out of the BB's restroom door and into a shouting, shoving crowd that had gathered behind the store. The people were being herded into that spot by National Guard, confused, scared kids with assault rifles and no protective gear. Somebody started shooting, and a head burst like a balloon next to me, the dead guy flailing back through the door I had just exited. Days had passed since then. I knew that. I could feel it in my sore joints. I had a vague sense of cycles, of consciousness and unconsciousness. Sleeping through a night, drifting in and out of a day that was just as dark. I had been moved, and moved again, rolled down a hallway on a gurney. I remember having an IV in my arm for a while, and then they took it out, and then put it back. I had been outside at some point, behind a fence, talking to other people. I remembered screams and panic, all of it just flashing through my brain, like headlights passing a bedroom window at night. There and gone. Meaningless. Sleep. Awake. Dark. I had eyes. I felt the twitch of my eyelids opening and closing, though the view remained the same either way. Was I blind? I moved my right arm. I couldn't feel the dragging weight of plastic tubes attached, so I had been unhooked at some point. With some effort, I lifted my hand to my face to see if my eyes were covered. They were not. I blinked. I tried to lift my head and groaned. A bolt of pain fired up my neck. I looked around for the glow of a digital clock, or a slit of light under a door, or blinking green lights on a console measuring my vitals. Nothing. I tried to sit up. I peeled my back off the sheets, but my other arm wouldn't come with me. I tugged on it and heard the clank of metal and felt cold steel around my wrist. I was handcuffed to the bed. That is never a good sign. I peeled apart my dry lips and croaked, "Hello?" Nobody would have heard it unless they were sitting on the bed with me. I tried to swallow and give it another shot. "Hello? Is anybody out there?" Something about the echo of my voice told me I was in a small room. "Hello?" I waited for the sound of a shuffling nurse's footsteps outside, or even the jingling of keys and a burly prison guard to tell me to shut the hell up or he was going to put me in solitary. Nothing. I thought I detected the sound of water dripping somewhere. Suddenly I was certain, absolutely certain, that I had been abandoned here. No question. They had stuck me in a building, chained to a bed, and left me here to die of thirst. They didn't even leave a light on. I'd lie here for days, pissing and shitting myself like a neglected dog in a trailer park whose owner was off doing meth somewhere. "Hey! Anybody?" I yanked at the cuffs. It didn't do anything but make an irritating noise. I couldn't even see a door. There isn't a door. They just built up a brick wall over the opening, or locked me in a shipping container and bulldozed 1,000 tons of dirt on top of it, or sank it to the bottom of the ocean. "Hey! Hey!" I got one leg up. Neither were restrained as far as I could tell, and kicked at the railing the cuffs were attached to. I had no strength in the leg. The railing didn't give. "Hey! God damn it!" "Sir?" A tiny voice. I froze. Did I actually hear that? I blinked into the darkness, stupidly, looking for movement. Somebody could have been sitting on my lap and I wouldn't have seen them. "Hello? Is someone there?" "It's just me." Sounded like a little girl. "Can you be quieter? You're scaring us." "Who are you?" "I'm Anna. Is your name Walt?" "No, my name is David. Who's Walt?" "I thought they called you Walt earlier, when they brought you in." "No. Oh, okay. Wong. They probably said Wong. That's my last name. David Wong." "Are you from Japan?" "No. Who else is in here?" "Just us. You, me, and Mr. Bear." "Okay, Anna, this is going to seem like a weird question, but is Mr. Bear an actual bear or a stuffed bear?" "He's stuffed when grown-ups are around. Sorry if I scared you." "What are you doing here, Anna?" "Same as you. We might be sick, and they want to make sure other people don't catch it." "Where are we?" "Why didn't you ask that question first?" "What?" "It didn't make sense to ask me what I was doing here if you didn't know where here was." "Are we in the hospital?" No answer. "Anna? You there?" "Yes. Sorry, I nodded my head, but I forgot that you couldn't see me. We're in the old hospital. In the basement." "Then where is everybody? And what happened to the lights?" "You can ask the spaceman when he comes by again. There were lots of them here before, but everybody's been gone for a while." I didn't need to ask who the spacemen were. guys in contamination suits. How long has it been since they've come by?
I don't know. I don't have my phone. It was 2 sleeps ago. I'm sure they'll be back soon. Maybe they close on the weekend.
Do you remember when they brought you here?
Sort of. They came and got my dad, and they told us we couldn't go home and moved everybody downstairs to the special hospital, and that's where we are now.
In a whisper, she said,
I think we should be quiet now.
How old are you, Anna?
She whispered, 8.
Listen to me. I don't want you to be scared, but they left us here with no power and no food and no water. Now, hopefully they'll come back and take care of us, but we have to make plans assuming they won't.
If you drank all of your water, you can have some of mine.
Do I have water? Where?
On the table next to you.
I reached over with my right hand and hit a row of shrink-wrapped bottles. I dug a bottle out and drank half of it and went into a coughing fit.
Shh! We really should be quiet. There's a box of granola bars and stuff over there, too, but they're not very good.
Why are we being quiet?
I think I hear the Shadow Man.
I choked on my water.
Shh!
Anna,
Please!
We lay there in silence, floating in still darkness like a pair of eyeless cave fish. Finally, Anna said,
I think he's gone.
The Shadow Man?
Yes.
Describe him to me.
He's a shadow with eyes.
Where did you see him?
Over there.
I can't see where you're pointing.
Over in the corner.
When? When did you see him before, I mean? She sighed.
I don't have a clock.
What did it do?
It just stood there. I was scared. Mr. Bear growled at him, and he eventually went away.
I had read somewhere that you could get out of handcuffs if you broke the bone at the base of your thumb. Or maybe just dislocated it? Either way, I'd have to find out if my legs were strong enough to do that. The issue would then be trying to get the presumably locked door open one-handed. Maybe Anna could help. I said, Okay, we have to get out of this place.
They told us we couldn't leave.
Anna, you're going to find out soon that grown-ups aren't always right. Let's just say it's better if we're not here when that thing comes back. But if it does, I don't want you to panic. I don't think it's here for you. I think it's here for me.
Yes, that's what he said.
He talked to you? She hesitated.
Sort of. I could hear him. I don't think he had a mouth, like Hello Kitty.
And what did he say?
I don't want to repeat it, but I don't think he likes you.
I said nothing. Anna asked,
Do you want Mr. Bear?
No, thank you. I pulled my hand as far out of the handcuffs as I could, which wasn't far. I could feel the little knob of bone stopping it, 2 inches down from the thumb. If I yanked it hard enough, surely it would scrape off that bone, and the blood would lubricate it. Be a matter of not passing out from the pain, and me not being too much of a pussy. Metal scraping. I was about to ask Anna what she was doing when it registered that, holy shit, that's the door is open! I sat up and threw aside the blanket. The room was bathed in light, a pair of powerful flashlights in the doorway, side by side like the eyes of a giant robot that had poked its head up through the floor. I was momentarily blinded by the light, but I squinted and looked to the corner, yelling, Anna, get... The words died in my mouth. The room I was in, now fully illuminated by the flashlights, contained a small bedside table, a toilet, a filthy sink, and 1 bed. Mine. I was absolutely alone in the room. On the floor was a tattered, filthy old teddy bear. Gloved hands grabbed me, holding me to the bed. It was 2 dudes wearing decontamination spacesuits, but the suits weren't white. They were black, and they had pads on the arms, torso, and thighs like body armor. Their faceplates were tinted so you couldn't see the face of the wearer. The cuff was removed from the bed rail and locked around my other wrist. Leg irons were placed around my ankles. I was dragged from the bed and marched down a long hallway lined with rusting steel doors, just like the one I had been yanked through. There were other people here, roused to life by the sounds of us passing their cells. I heard an old man screaming for his wife or daughter. "Katie! Katie! Can you hear me?" With no response. I heard a scraping from behind one door, like somebody was clawing to get out. I heard someone beg for food. I heard someone beg for pain pills. At the moment I passed a particular door, a male voice on the other side said, "Hey, buddy, hey, open this door for me, please. It's my wife. My wife is in here and she's bleeding. I'm begging you." I stopped. "I'm here. What's—" The gloved hands clamped on me again to pull me along. "Hey, are you gonna help that guy? Hey!" No answer from the guards. From behind me, the desperate voice begged and howled and wept. The hallway came to a bend and continued to the right, but I was stopped in front of a TV screen that had been mounted on the wall. There was a speaker mounted below it with a push-to-talk button. The screen blinked to life, and there was a man in another decontamination suit. This one, the normal, friendly white like you'd expect from a government agency. The face behind the clear plexiglass mask was familiar to me, the neatly cropped silver hair and weathered wrinkles. "Good morning, Mr. Wong. How are we feeling today?" "Dr. Tennant? What the hell are you doing here? Am I dreaming this? If we just keep answering each other's questions with questions, this conversation won't go anywhere, will it?" "I'm feeling like shit. Why are you here?" "You don't remember?" "Obviously not." "What do you remember?" "A bunch of guys in spacesuits were shooting people in BB's parking lot. Guts sprayed all over me. Next thing I know, I'm chained to a bed in this prison, and now my therapist is here for some reason." "Prison? Is that where you think you are?" "There are tiny rooms with locks and handcuffs, and I can't leave. Call it whatever you want. How long have I been here?" "You honestly don't remember? Anything at all?" "No." "You've lost all memories from your arrival until now? Think hard for me." "I don't remember anything, goddammit!" "I completely understand your agitation, but I'm going to have to beg for a little bit more of your patience. I'm part of the team sent to observe you and the others. We're trying to get you well." He looked down and was doing something with his hands, tapping on a laptop, making notes, immune to the sound of muffled suffering echoing down the hall behind me. "Doctor, is somebody going to help those people back there?" "That would be ill-advised. I assure you that the patients who actually need help are receiving it. Again, this is not a prison." "So, am I free to leave?" "If I'm satisfied that you've stabilized, you'll be free to rejoin the others in quarantine." "Where's that?" "Over at the hospital grounds, the primary quarantine area." "But I can't leave there?" "I'm afraid not. The government would have some very strong words for me if I were to let any of you wander out." "Where am I now?" "In the old Firth Asylum, the abandoned TB hospital just down the street. Temporary Reaper Command Center and Patient Processing." I thought he said raper and decided then and there that I had lost my mind. "The who Command Center?" REPER, Rapid Exotic Pathogen Eradication/Research. A not widely publicized task force for situations like this. "What situations are like this?" "You and I have had this conversation before, by the way. I know what you're about to ask next." "Are John and Amy here?" And once again, I can tell you we have 3 Johns. Washington, Rawls, and Perzinski. But no Amy's. I had a dozen follow-up questions. Were they okay? Did they get out of town? Where were they now? But I knew this asshole wouldn't answer them. Wait, did you say rejoin? So I've been in quarantine before? We brought you over for testing, but we're ready to transport you back. Testing? Yes, we're still trying to perfect our method of detecting the infection. And this test wiped out my memory. That's merely a side effect. One I do believe is temporary. How long have I been here? Here or in quarantine in general? Let's go for the second one. Ever since the outbreak. And how long ago was that? Longer than most of us would have preferred to stay. Let's just put it that way. Oh, fuck you. And you get to keep us here, forever, until you figure out how to cure the infection? If you have a better idea, you be sure to let us know. Trust me, no one is enjoying this. The best thing you and everyone else can do is cooperate. He finished his laptop work with a flourish of key taps and looked me in the eye. So, in that spirit, tell me how you are feeling. Why is it dark in here? Electricity is out to much of the town. We have diesel generators, but they are insufficient for the whole facility, so we are forced to pick and choose. Other than your missing memory, are you having any other symptoms? Dreams? Hallucinations? Well, if I was, I wouldn't remember them, would I? You know, because I'm missing my goddamn memory? Of course. How are you feeling physically? I have a headache and my joints hurt. Those are expected side effects of the tranquilizers and being bedridden, and also should pass quickly. Do you remember why you were put under tranquilizers in the first place? Any question you ask me that begins with the words, "Do you remember?" is going to be answered with no. Ha! Understood. Do you feel like you are up to rejoining the others? The others? How many others are there? Can you tell me that? In the primary quarantine area? Nearly 500, at one time. Jesus Christ. And how many of them are people like me, who you know goddamn well aren't infected? Now, David, can't you see that I do not know that? Do I fucking look infected? Ah, I see. Due to being muddled by the medication, you are missing some key information about our circumstances. It turns out that appearances are not a perfect indication of infection. Not, unfortunately, until it's too late. So hopefully you understand that we must take precautions. Dr. Tennant, can you hear the fucking people behind me screaming for help? Can you hear them over this intercom thing? Which people? The gentleman asking for help with his wife? We lost 2 staff members trying to help that man's poor wife. If you open that door, you'll indeed find what looks like a very frail, wounded woman. If you get within striking distance, you'll find that woman is the transfigured tongue of a grindworm. A what? I'm sorry. We have to come up with names for the organisms the parasite transforms its victims into. Without getting into detail, let me just say that we spent 16 hours trying to recover our 2 staff members from the creature, their screams echoing down this hall the entire night, and next day, as they were slowly twisted to pieces. The creature has been spitting splinters of their bones under its door ever since, so hopefully you'll understand why we're leaving that door locked. Fool me once, as they say. So, you just lock everybody up and wait for us to turn monster? As I said, we're making progress. But regardless, this conversation is only wasting time and taxpayer money at this point, when all I need to know is if you feel up to joining the others out in the fresh air and sunshine of the hospital lawn. We need your room, to be perfectly frank. Yeah, whatever. Great, great. If you turn to your right and continue down that hall, you'll find an elevator. And then what will... The monitor blinked off. One of the two guys behind me told me to hold still and unlocked my cuffs and leg irons. He pointed and through a speaker in his helmet said, "End of the hall." I said, "What about the girl?" "Sir, move to the end of the hall." There was a little girl in my room named Anna. I don't know if she snuck in and back out or what, but she was in there right before you guys arrived. The guy gave a glance to his partner. Uncertainty? The partner said, "Move to the elevator, or you're going back to the room." I obeyed, my unsteady footsteps echoing in a dim hallway where the only illumination was dribbling out of a set of emergency lights to my left. Way down at the end was a barely lit elevator standing open. Halfway down, I turned and looked back for the two guards. Not there. Just lonely blackness beyond the pool of emergency light. God damn, did this seem like a long walk. My legs were weak and shaky. How long had I been strapped to that bed? What kind of drugs did they have me on? I felt my face and had no bandage there, just a little bump where the spider had bitten me. Where were John and Amy? What happened to the town? Had the world ended? Why did this hallway smell like shit? "Walt," a whisper behind me. I stopped and held my breath. Had I actually heard it? I continued, the elevator waiting right up ahead in the darkness, barely enough light inside to fill the tiny space. I stopped again. I thought I could hear smaller, lighter footsteps trailing mine. Or maybe an echo. I whispered, "Anna?" Not sure any sound actually came out. I turned and walked as fast as I could toward the open elevator, without breaking into what could be called a run. I made it inside, spun around, and punched the button that said 1. All the other buttons from there up had been covered with electrician's tape. Nothing happened. I was standing under what seemed like a 25-watt bulb that was slightly brighter than a candle. Dead silence. No, wait. There was a faint sound. Not footsteps. A light scraping, then a brief pause. Then the scrape again. The irregular rhythm of somebody trying to drag or carry an awkward load. Or maybe just trying to walk with a severely wounded leg. Getting louder. Closer. I could now make out a smacking, sticky sound, like a person loudly eating pasta right next to your ear. I punched the 1 button again. I punched the closed door button. I punched the 1 button again. Then I mashed the buttons under the electrical tape, all of them. Walt! That wet sound, scraping toward me. I could hear it clearly now, not 10 feet away, moving faster. Walt! 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 The door closed. If they didn't want the patients at the undisclosed Firth Asylum Command Center / Patient Processing Facility to feel like prisoners, they were doing the world's shittiest job. In the light, I saw I was wearing a green prisoner jumpsuit. When the elevator arrived at the top, 2 more black-suited spacemen roughly dragged me out, put a black hood over my head, and threw me into the back of a military truck. The hospital was just a couple of blocks away, but the trip took 20 minutes. We drove, stopped, waited, drove, waited again. Then an alarm went off, and I heard an electric sound like a garage door opening. We rolled forward for 5 seconds, then the sound again, and the clicks of latches. Then there was another gate opening, followed by the opening of the doors of the truck. I felt sunlight and a blast of cold air hit my hood. I was dragged out and told to lay flat on the grass. I was told that if I raised any part of my body before commanded to, I would be shot. Holy shit. They yanked off my hood. The truck left, and I risked craning my neck enough to see a chain-link fence roll shut behind it. I turned the other way and saw that there was another fence. I was in a gap the width of a city street between 2 tall fences that were each topped with coils of fuck-you razor wire. The inner fence The one opposite the one the truck had just slipped out of was opaque. They had attached tarps or some plastic sheets to it. The goal was clearly to make sure the separation between the hospital quarantine and the outside world was absolute. The plastic sheets were colorful and had printing all along them. The one nearest to me said 91.9 K-Rock, Rocktober Rockocalypse. I wondered how long they'd leave me laying like this, but soon a gate in the inner fence slid open and a voice from a PA system told me to go through. I obeyed and entered quarantine, apparently for the second time. I don't know what I was expecting to find inside the gate, but it was just the hospital lawn. The building itself was immediately to my right, the front lawn of the hospital stretching off to my left. The sun hatefully spat daylight into my eyes. How long had it been since I'd seen the sun? And I gathered it was probably mid-afternoon or so. My first thought was ribs. Meat smoke hit my nostrils, like being downwind from a barbecue joint. I heard voices. Somebody laughed. Hell, it's a party! What was stranger than that was what wasn't there. Men in spacesuits carrying guns. I assumed I would be roughly dragged in and told to go report to this tent or to submit to some tests or shit. But I was on my own. No soldiers. Nobody who looked official. No staff. Instead, a smattering of tired-looking people in jumpsuits, some with hospital blankets wrapped around their shoulders, were staring at me like they were expecting someone else. When they saw it was me, they all shambled away without a word. Well, screw you too. I spotted a pillar of smoke 100 yards or so away, off near the fence that wrapped its way around the perimeter of the hospital grounds, a fence that did not exist the last time I was here, and that was covered entirely in garish ads that were each wrong somehow, like they didn't have a big enough tarp and covered it in rejected billboards somebody had laying around in a warehouse. Subway, come taste our new beard! I wandered toward the fire, having absolutely no idea what else to do. It was the same strategy I employ at parties. Find the food first. My lungs quivered at the contact with the chilled air. Not an unpleasant feeling. Kind of felt like freedom. Hey! Spider-Man! Spider-Man's back! The voice came from above me, and I admit my first reaction was to glance around for the actual Spider-Man. Why not? He wasn't here. I found the source of the voice, a black dude poking his head out of a fifth-floor window of the hospital. I had no idea if he was talking to me or somebody else, so I kept walking. I couldn't help but notice the window he was yelling from was not open. The glass was busted out. That seemed weird to me. I passed a fat lady in a dark green janitor's jumpsuit like mine, sleeping under a blanket on what looked like a waiting room sofa that had been dragged out into the yard. The upholstery was discolored, like it had been rained on. I kicked an empty water bottle. It skidded and bounced off another one. Trash was everywhere. I noticed somebody had knocked over the Florence Nightingale statue, laying on its side like they had just toppled a dictator. I shuffled toward the bonfire. A lot of people were congregating over there. Everybody wearing jumpsuits, either green like mine or blood red. Tenant, tell me this is not a goddamn prison yard. I passed the main entrance to the hospital. The sliding glass doors were propped open with 2 overflowing garbage cans. From the dim reception area inside, it appeared the whole building was without power. Post-apocalypse. How long had it been? A year? I wondered if the White House was trashed like this, the Lincoln bedroom full of refugees, or zombies. I caught a whiff of that meat smell from the fire, and my stomach growled. How long since I'd eaten? I felt slightly thinner, though that could have been due to the huge jumpsuit I was wearing. A clump of red jumpsuit guys were up ahead, talking and eating from bowls. I was going to ask them where the food table was, but at the sight of me, they all stopped talking, giving me a look like I was a cop, and they were all hiding joints. Everybody had patchy beards, greasy hair. Nobody shaving, nobody showering, On the ground were discarded plastic forks and paper plates tattooed with old grease stains.